Did he sign the separation papers yet? That was the first thing I heard when the call connected. I wasn't even supposed to pick up. My hands were covered in marinara from the leftover chicken parm I'd reheated for dinner. The phone buzzed once, and I almost let it go to voicemail. But something told me not to. No hello. No greeting. Just that sentence. And her voice. Flat. Like she was confirming a grocery list. Like my existence was just a task she was checking off. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I looked at the screen. She had called me. Not the other way around. Speaker was on. Timer running. Still active. Someone laughed in the background. Then a man's voice replied. Not yet. But he's halfway there. Still thinks you're fighting for the marriage. Another voice chimed in. Female this time. Tipsy maybe. Girl, you're ruthless. I love it. Then laughter. Champagne glasses clinking. Some jazz version of No Scrubs playing faintly in the background. I stood in the kitchen, sauce cooling on my plate, phone against my ear, knees locked. What the hell was I listening to? The party behind the curtain. I don't know how much time passed, maybe a minute, maybe 5, but the call stayed connected. And the longer I listened, the more it felt like I was sitting behind some invisible curtain, watching the final scene of a play I didn't know I was in. If I have to keep pretending much longer, I'll lose my mind, she said, somewhere between annoyed and amused. He cried last week when I said I missed how we used to be. Can you believe that? Laughter again. Someone snorted. You're a better actress than I thought, her boss said. His voice was deeper now, closer. But after tonight, you don't have to pretend anymore. And then, silence. Just 5 long seconds of quiet that said everything. The kind of silence that only happens when lips meet. The kind of silence that's loud in your bones. I didn't hang up. I wish I could tell you I slammed the phone down. Or that I screamed. Or that I drove straight to wherever that party was being held. But I didn't. I listened. Like a coward. Like a man slowly realizing he's the punchline in a joke everyone else already got. At some point, the call cut off. No goodbye. No explanation. And I just stood there. In the kitchen. Holding a fork I didn't remember picking up. My dinner stone cold. My heart doing that weird hiccup thing it does when you're about to pass out. The dog barked. The fridge hummed. Outside, someone was mowing their lawn at 9:30 p.m. on a Friday. Even that felt more normal than what I had just heard. What now? She got home 3 hours later. Lipstick wiped off, but not fully. Smelled like wine and grass and a perfume she doesn't own. Said she was exhausted. Said they'd launched the new product. Said she stayed late to clean up. I nodded. I said, of course. I even helped her out of her heels. And now I'm writing this. On my old iPad. In the laundry room. Next to a basket of unfolded towels I suddenly don't feel like folding anymore. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not even sure what I am looking for. But if anyone wants to hear what I found the next morning. I didn't sleep that night. Not a second. I lay next to her in bed, watching the ceiling fan rotate, feeling every turn like it was mocking me. She fell asleep quickly, which made me feel even sicker. How do you sleep so soundly after kissing another man? After making jokes about my tears with people who probably don't even know my name? At 3:17 a.m., I got out of bed, sat in the hallway for a while. I kept hearing echoes of the call. Her voice asking about the separation papers. The snort laugh from her friend. Her boss telling her she didn't need to pretend anymore. Every word played in my head like a cursed voicemail I couldn't delete. By sunrise, I made a decision. I was going to find out everything. Saturday morning, I acted normal. Made French toast with extra cinnamon the way she likes. She wore one of my shirts like she always does on weekends. She kissed me on the cheek and said I was being sweet. I nearly choked on my own silence. If I hadn't heard the call, I would have believed this moment. That's the scariest part. The performance was perfect. But now I knew it was a performance. After breakfast, she said she was heading out to a yoga class. I said nothing. Just nodded. She left her laptop open on the kitchen counter, something she never does. I don't know if it was arrogance or carelessness, but either way, it was the first mistake she made that I could see. I sat down and opened the browser. Gmail was still signed in. What I found was worse than I imagined. There were no emails with titles like Secret Plan or Affair Notes. It wasn't that obvious. But the inbox was full of forwarded itineraries from her boss, calendar invites titled Midnight Strategy and Weekend Deep Dive. All of them conveniently scheduled during her so-called mental health hikes and self-care getaways. I clicked on one from 3 weeks ago. The body of the email just said, Same room as last time. Discretion, of course. He still doesn't suspect, I assume? She hadn't replied in text. Just a thumbs up emoji. Cold. Efficient. There was a Dropbox link attached, and I hesitated for a full minute before clicking. My hand shook. Inside were two photos. One was of her and her boss in a hotel mirror. She was in a bathrobe, holding a glass of champagne, smiling like she didn't have a husband waiting at home with lasagna and dog toys. The second was worse. It was of a document. Not legal. Not yet. But close. A draft of a post-separation agreement. Dated. Typed. With notes in the margins from her. One of the notes said, "Make sure to position this so Brian feels like it's his decision. Less drama." I wanted to punch the wall. Break something. But I didn't. I closed the laptop. Sat there in silence again. The timer on the oven dinged, even though nothing was baking. When she got back from yoga, she asked if I wanted to watch a movie. I said I was heading out for a bit. She smiled and said, "Okay. Love you." I didn't say it back. I drove around aimlessly for almost an hour before parking in front of a coffee shop I hadn't been to in years. I walked in, ordered something I didn't even want, sat at a corner table, and pulled out my phone. I didn't know who to call. Not my brother. He hated her from day one. Not my mom. She'd cry. Not my best friend. He was the best man at our wedding. So I scrolled instead. Through Reddit. Through forums. Through blogs by people who'd been betrayed so quietly they didn't know they were bleeding until they collapsed. Then I saw a post. A comment, actually. Someone had written, "If you think you've seen it all, check the mail. The real stories never come through screens." Something about that stuck with me. I drove back home. She was in the shower. I walked outside to our mailbox, something she always grabs before I can. There wasn't much. A few credit card offers, a community flyer, and an unmarked manila envelope with no return address. Inside, photos, 8 of them, each one grainier than the last. Different hotel rooms, different dates scrawled on the backs, all of them showing her. With him, laughing, holding hands, hugging from behind. The last one, them kissing, in our driveway, while I was inside. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was deliberate, calculated, and someone out there wanted me to know. I don't know who sent the envelope. I don't know how they got my address, or why they chose now, but I think they're trying to warn me, or break me, or both. Either way, they succeeded. And this is just the beginning. The manila envelope sat on the coffee table for 2 days before I touched it again. I don't know why. Maybe I was afraid there was more in it that I missed. Maybe I was afraid there wasn't. I spent those 2 days pretending badly. I went through the motions, just like she had been. We made dinner together. We watched a movie. She even sat on my lap at one point, kissed my neck, and whispered something about feeling close again lately. I nodded, smiled. But in my mind, I kept going back to those photos. The angles, the distance. They weren't selfies. They weren't taken by hotel cameras. Someone had been following them, close enough to capture emotion, far enough to stay unseen. The envelope had no return address printed, but something about the flap seemed off when I reopened it. I don't know what made me check. It looked sealed just fine. But when I ran my finger beneath the glued edge, it caught on something. A second slip of paper, hidden between the 2 folds. It had been taped there, like someone wanted me to find it only if I was paranoid enough to check. There were only 4 words written on it, scribbled in neat, blocky handwriting. "You're not the only one." That hit differently. I felt it in my spine. I reread it about a dozen times before I slipped it into my wallet. That sentence opened a door in my head I hadn't even considered. Until now, everything I had discovered pointed to Delaney cheating on me. Me being the fool, the abandoned, the discarded placeholder. But that note, it implied I wasn't just the victim. I might be part of a pattern, a web. That night, I waited until she fell asleep. I faked the usual, tired sigh, light snore, turned toward the wall. After her breathing slowed, I slipped out of bed and took her phone from the charger. I tried to look before, but she had Face ID enabled and would never let it out of her sight. But I knew something she didn't. After her last iOS update, she had also activated a feature that let her messages sync with her MacBook. The one she left unlocked that morning while she was in the garden with the dog. I tiptoed downstairs and opened the laptop. There it was, her iMessage account, glowing softly in the dark. My hands were ice as I scrolled. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. More photos? Plans? Lies? Instead, I found a thread with a name I didn't recognize. Marla H. The conversation went back months. Marla wasn't a friend. She was something else. Maybe an ex-coworker? The messages were coded, at least at first. Lots of vague jokes. Mentions of another one bites the dust and clean getaway vibes. But then, 2 weeks ago, Delaney wrote, "He still thinks I'm his fresh start. Isn't that wild?" Marla replied, "You should teach a course at this point. What number is this, 4? Delaney, 5. But this one's the softest." I felt like I'd been punched in the throat. 5. I'm number 5? I scrolled further, my vision swimming. There were references to other names: Cody, Aaron, Tom. Men I'd never heard of. And none of them were her boss. That's when it hit me. Grant, the boss, was just one of them. Maybe not even the main one. Maybe he was a number, too. Delaney wasn't just cheating. She was collecting. And someone knew. Someone watching from the outside had seen it all and sent me that envelope. Not out of kindness, but because they had been burned, too. A minute later, her phone buzzed on the nightstand upstairs. I nearly jumped. I closed the laptop, ran upstairs, and slid the phone back onto the charger before she stirred. I sat on the edge of the bed, heart hammering, the room spinning around me. Everything was upside down. I didn't know who I was married to. I didn't even know who I was anymore. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I needed to find out who else was part of this. And maybe, just maybe, whoever left that note could help me figure out what the hell kind of story I've been living in. It's strange how easily your brain slips into detective mode when it's drowning in betrayal. I never considered myself obsessive, not before all this. I used to roll my eyes when people talked about gut feelings and trusting instincts. But now, every time Delaney blinks too long, every time she checks her watch, every time she mentions a name I don't recognize, my mind races to connect dots that might not even exist. Or worse, ones that do. After what I read in those messages with Marla, after finding out I'm not the first, not even close, I started retracing things. Not just from our relationship, but from hers. Before me. The stories she told casually over the years. The exes she joked about. The men she claimed couldn't handle her independence. Back then, I thought it was empowering. I liked that she was strong, direct, unapologetically herself. Now I hear those same stories and wonder how many of them ended like mine, or worse. So I made a list. Not out loud. Not on paper. Just in my head. I started remembering every name she ever mentioned. Cody, Aaron, Tom, the guy from her college town who she said moved away suddenly and ghosted her. The one she called emotionally fragile. I remembered his name because it was unusual, Lyle. She used to laugh about how he cried during animated movies and had a Pinterest account. Too soft for the real world, she once said, with that dismissive little head tilt. But now that word, soft, it hit differently. She called me that, too, to her boss. And in that message with Marla, soft. Was that her type? Or her target? That night, after she went to bed, I sat in the living room with my laptop and typed Lyle Fairfield into every search bar I could think of. Social media, public records, local news. For the first hour, I found nothing. It was like he never existed. No LinkedIn, no Facebook, no wedding announcements, no career updates. Just an old Reddit account from 2015 where he commented on hiking boots and anxiety. And then I found it. A single post on a grief forum, dated 5 years ago, written by someone named Fairfield_mom. The post was short, barely a paragraph. It read, "Still no answers. Still no trace. I just want to know if my son is alive. He left Vermont after breaking up with his girlfriend. Said he was going to the Catskills to clear his head. That was the last we ever heard from him. He would never just disappear." No replies. No updates. Just that lonely, unanswered call into the void. I read the post again. And again. My mouth went dry. Delaney had told me she and Lyle had ended things peacefully. Said he wanted something slower, quieter. That he'd moved to Maine to start some kind of herbal tea business. She even made fun of the name once. Lyle's Leaves. Now I realized that might have been a cover story. One of many. But this time, there was no new job, no marriage, no social media trail. Just a dead end. I tried not to spiral, but my brain didn't care. What if he hadn't ghosted her? What if he tried to leave, and something stopped him? What if she didn't just collect relationships like trophies? What if she buried them? Was I next? The thought hit like cold water, and I nearly laughed. It felt insane. Murder? That's not what this is. Right? She's a liar, yes. A manipulator. A performer. But she wouldn't go that far. Would she? But then I remembered something. About 6 months ago, I got sick. Really sick. We thought it was food poisoning, but it lasted longer than it should have. I was dizzy for days, couldn't keep anything down, lost 12 pounds in a week. Delaney was caring. Maybe too caring. She made every meal. She insisted I take only the tea she brewed. She kept me away from the doctor, said she read online that hospitals would just give me fluids and a bill. At the time, I felt grateful. Now, I don't know. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I really did just have a stomach bug. But maybe, just maybe, she had tried to make her move early, and it didn't work. Or she changed her mind. Or someone stopped her. Maybe that someone was whoever sent me the envelope. I couldn't sleep after that. My mind was moving too fast. I decided to drive. Clear my head. At 2:40 a.m., I pulled out of the driveway and headed nowhere. The town was dead quiet. Streetlights blinking. No cars. Just me and the sound of tires humming over asphalt. Eventually, I ended up near a diner that used to be open 24/7. It wasn't anymore, pandemic cutbacks, but I sat in the parking lot anyway. Something about the neon lights made me feel less alone. I scrolled back through that grief forum. The post was still there. And suddenly, I noticed a reply that hadn't been there before. It was new. 10 minutes old. The account was anonymous. No name. No profile pic. Just this message. I think I know who he was dating. If you're still looking, check the address on June Street. Apartment C. My heart jumped. June Street is in my town. Delaney used to live in apartment C before we moved in together. If that message was real, someone else out there knew what happened to Lyle. And possibly what Delaney really is. Not just who she's with now, but who she used to be. Before the mask. Before me. I sat there until sunrise, watching that comment like it was going to vanish. I don't know who posted it. But I know one thing now for sure. Someone's watching her. And maybe someone's watching me too. I sat in the parking lot for over an hour after reading that comment. June Street. Apartment C. I'd driven past it before. An old triplex at the edge of town, near the overgrown train tracks. One of those buildings that looks like it was never really new to begin with. Peeling siding, crooked blinds, a mailbox that looked like it had been punched more than once. But what got me was the timing. That comment came exactly 10 minutes before I saw it. Meaning someone knew I'd be reading that forum. Someone was following my actions in real time. That should have scared me more than it did. I wasn't scared. I was consumed. When you spend weeks pretending to smile at someone you're beginning to suspect could destroy you, fear becomes something quieter. It doesn't scream anymore. It just hums under your skin. So I drove to June Street. Slowly. No music. No lights. I parked 2 houses down, near a fence half swallowed by weeds, and sat there with the engine off, my hand hovering over the keys. The triplex looked abandoned. One porch light flickering. No cars in the drive. But apartment C had a dim glow behind the blinds. Someone was home. I got out, walked across the cracked concrete, and knocked. No answer at first. I stood there with my fists stuffed in my hoodie, wondering what the hell I was even going to say. Hey, did your son date my wife before disappearing? Oh, and by the way, she might be a sociopath. But before I could knock again, the door creaked open about 5 inches. A woman stood behind it. Older. Late 60s, maybe. Thin. Hair pulled into a messy bun that made her look like she hadn't left the house in weeks. Her eyes were bloodshot but alert. Calculating. You're him, she said. I froze. Excuse me. You're the husband. She didn't ask. She stated it. Like she already knew. Yeah. I guess I am. Or was. I don't really know anymore. She opened the door wider. The inside of the apartment looked like time had stopped somewhere in 1993. Floral wallpaper peeling. A landline on the wall with a long, tangled cord. She waved me in without saying anything else. The living room was full of photos. None of them framed. All laid out across a table covered in a white sheet. Most were faded prints, but one caught my eye immediately. Lyle, standing in front of a cabin, arm around someone cropped out of the frame. The edges of the photo were burned, like it had been retrieved from a fire. I didn't post the comment, she said, sitting on the edge of an armchair that looked like it might collapse under her. I don't know who did, but it doesn't surprise me that someone finally reached out. I sat on the edge of the couch, not knowing whether I should speak or just listen. So I listened. She went on. Lyle changed after her. It wasn't like he was lovesick. It was like he was scared. He started talking about leaving town, starting fresh. Said she was too intense. Controlling. He told me once, "Mom, she doesn't just break up. She ends you." I thought it was dramatic. Young love, you know. But then he stopped answering calls. No goodbye, just silence. I felt something twist in my chest. She told people he ghosted her, I said quietly. She laughed. A bitter, choked sound. Oh, I'm sure she did. She's charming. Knows how to perform. But I know what I know. My son wasn't the type to disappear. And he sure as hell wasn't the type to leave without telling me. I nodded slowly, staring at the photos on the table. One of them had Delaney in it. Younger, her hair shorter. She was smiling, but there was something strange in her eyes. Something calculated. I'd seen that same expression last week when she watched a squirrel fall off our deck railing. She didn't flinch, just sipped her coffee and said, "Gravity's undefeated." Then the woman leaned forward and said something I'll never forget. "I think she gets bored. That's when it happens. She loves the game, the seduction, the praise. But once she feels seen, truly seen, she panics. And she gets rid of the mirror. You're her mirror now." On the way back to the car, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. A deep, primal survival instinct. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was about erasure. And if Lal truly disappeared, and others before him were just names and coded texts, how long did I have before I became the next half-told story? I started thinking about the phone call again. The one she forgot to hang up. It had felt careless at the time, like she made a mistake. But now, I wondered if she wanted me to hear it. If it was part of the unraveling. If I was meant to break. To lash out. To give her a reason to finish what she started. But I hadn't. I was still calm. Still smiling. Still doing the dishes and walking the dog. And that, I realized, might be the only advantage I had left. Because she thinks I don't know. And if I keep pretending long enough, I might finally get to the truth. Or die trying. The morning after I visited apartment C, I barely spoke a word. I sat across from Delaney at breakfast, watching her stir her yogurt like she was painting something delicate. She talked about refinancing the car loan and ordering a new rug for the guest room. I nodded and answered in short syllables. Yes, maybe, sure. But inside, I was miles away, still in that peeling apartment, still staring at the photograph of a boy with half his face burned off the edge of the print, and his mother telling me I was a mirror she might soon decide to break. I tried to act normal, but I could feel it. Something in the air had shifted. Like the silence between us was no longer just marital fatigue. It was active, humming. Like we were both pretending not to notice the cracks spreading across the surface of a frozen lake. Around noon, I got a text from an unknown number. She's done this before. You're not the first she's buried in paperwork. I stared at the message for almost a full minute before typing back. Who are you? No answer. I waited, fingers twitching, pacing around the backyard until my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a different number. New area code. You'll want to check the deed. Look at the cosigner. That was it. I went inside, pulled the drawer where we kept all the official stuff, and began flipping through the manila folders until I found the deed to the house. I had looked at this 100 times before, during taxes, during refinancing talks, when we joked about selling everything and moving to Oregon. But now I looked at it differently. I scanned the lines carefully. Name, Brian Fletcher. Co-owner, Delaney Roslin. But then my eyes locked on something I hadn't noticed before, something that had never seemed important. Listed as primary financial guarantor, Jeremy C. Roslin. My heart stopped. Delaney has no brothers. No cousins close enough to put on paper. And her father's name isn't Jeremy. Her last name used to be something else entirely. She changed it right before our wedding. Said it was for branding. That she wanted something simpler, cleaner. I hadn't questioned it. Why would I? I searched the name. Jeremy C. Roslin. It took less than a minute to find him. He wasn't her relative. He was an attorney. A partner at a boutique law firm 2 states over that specialized in high-value divorce settlements, marital asset transfers, and strategic liability dissolutions. I scrolled through the firm's site, half expecting it to be some kind of scam, but no, it was very real, very polished. One of their case studies was even featured in a Forbes write-up about quiet exits from toxic marriages. And there was Delaney, in the gallery section, not labeled, just a background attendee in a company retreat photo, sipping champagne behind a group of partners on a yacht deck. She was smiling like she belonged there. I wasn't dealing with an affair anymore. I was dealing with a system, a process. I called the firm, said I was a prospective client, asked if I could speak with Jeremy directly. They transferred me to a voicemail. The voice on the other end was smooth, rehearsed. You've reached Jeremy Roslin. Please leave your name, your number, and the nature of the settlement you're seeking. I hung up. I suddenly felt sick. All of it. Every moment of warmth, every inside joke, every "we're in this together." All of it started to feel artificial, manufactured, not just by her, but by people around her. People who had done this before, who had walked other men through this same funnel, made them feel like they were part of something meaningful, only to gut them financially, emotionally, and reputationally. I checked my bank statements. Nothing strange. Yet. But when I opened my work email, I found something I hadn't expected. A notification from HR, subject line, notice of professional review. No details. Just a note that I'd been flagged for an upcoming performance audit and would be receiving further documentation by the end of the week. I work in academic administration. My performance is stable, consistent. I've never once had a complaint. Until now. I sat there frozen, mouth dry, the cursor blinking over the email like it was mocking me. Could she be reaching into my job? Could she be trying to dismantle me from the inside out? No, that's crazy. Except was it? Delaney came home that evening holding Thai food and a new plant. She kissed me on the cheek, asked how my day was. I told her fine. We ate in silence, and she talked about how fiddle leaf figs were back in according to some blog. I stared at her hands. Perfectly manicured. No ring on her right index finger anymore. That was new. When she got up to water the new plant, I opened her purse while she was in the other room. I know I shouldn't have, but I did. Inside, I found a receipt from a cafe in a city 2 hours away, dated 4 days ago. She'd told me she was getting her nails done that day, but the receipt had 2 drinks on it, 2 meals, and scrawled across the back of it in black ink was a name I hadn't seen before. Martin H. No number, no message, just the name. That's when I knew she wasn't finished. Not with me, and not with whatever game she was still playing. I couldn't stop staring at the name, Martin H. That receipt from the out-of-town cafe was creased and folded like it had been in her purse for days. The handwriting on the back wasn't hers. I knew that instantly. I'd seen Delaney write on birthday cards, envelopes, sticky notes. Her handwriting always curled at the end of letters, with perfect loops, like someone who took pride in appearing effortless. This writing was sharp, tense. Block letters pressed too hard into the paper, like the person who wrote it was angry or scared. And she had kept it. Not thrown away, not shredded. Kept it. Why? I searched the name that night after she fell asleep. Martin H. was far too vague to pin down, so I added the name of the cafe, then the city, then keywords like incident, employee, missing, court. One result stood out. An archived article from a small-town local paper, dated 3 years ago. Headline: Local business consultant involved in confidential dispute with former client. There was no photo, just a first name, Martin H. Last name redacted due to pending resolution. The article was light on facts, clearly pulled after legal pressure, but it mentioned a branding consultant, male, in his late 30s, who had filed a private injunction against a woman for contractual fraud and psychological manipulation during partnership. The case had been sealed before anything went public. The firm he worked at had since scrubbed their website. No mention of him anywhere. But one detail jumped out at me like a punch in the face. The article said the woman was from Vermont. It didn't name her, of course, but I didn't need it to. I sat there in the dark, rereading the short article over and over, my fingers twitching. This wasn't just a pattern of broken hearts. This wasn't even about affairs anymore. This was about control, legal manipulation, reputation erasure. Delaney wasn't just cycling through men. She was setting them up, burning them down, and moving on before the ashes cooled. And now I had 2 names. Lyle, who disappeared. Martin, who tried to fight back but got swallowed by paperwork. And me, still in the middle of it, pretending to be asleep beside the woman who might be designing my downfall. I couldn't sit still. I needed confirmation. So I took the risk and replied to the unknown number that had texted me about the deed. I typed, "Tell me who Martin H. is. I found the receipt. I need more." No response. Then, 20 minutes later, he tried. He was smarter than the others. That's why she shut him down harder. I stared at the screen, Jaw clenched. Where is he now? 3 dots. Then the message came. He doesn't show up in photos anymore. She made sure of that. I read it again. Then again. It made no sense at first. Then I realized they weren't being metaphorical. They meant it literally. The next morning, I went into the hallway closet, pulled out our wedding album, and turned to the guest photos. We'd hired a photographer to walk around the venue and take candids of the guests before the ceremony. I remember that because one guy, Delaney's old mentor, as she described him, had shown up early and left before the vows. She told me later that he was camera shy, didn't like being in pictures. I'd never met him. His name? Martin. My hands went cold. I flipped through every page. He wasn't in a single shot. Not in group photos. Not in crowd images. Nothing. There was no visual record of this man ever being there. But I remember shaking his hand. I remember his nervous smile. I remember him pulling me aside and saying, "You're a good guy." That's not a compliment. That's a warning. At the time, I thought he was drunk. Now I think he was terrified. I wanted to confront her. I really did. I wanted to slam the album down on the table, shove the receipt in her face, and scream until the walls cracked. But I didn't, because now I knew exactly what she was waiting for. She wanted the explosion. She wanted the meltdown. She wanted the file marked emotional instability when she eventually sat across from some polished mediator and said I was unwell, that I was paranoid, dangerous, unraveling. So I swallowed it. All of it. Like acid. I told her I wanted to go away for the weekend. Alone. Just to clear my head. She raised an eyebrow and said, "Really? You?" I nodded. Smiled. Told her it was a friend's cabin. No cell service. Just trees and books. She said it was a good idea. Said she'd use the time to reset. She didn't even ask which friend. That's how confident she is. That's how sure she is that I'm too soft to do anything that matters. But she doesn't know that I've already made contact. Not just with the person who sent the envelope, but someone else. Someone who used to know her before she changed her name. And they told me one thing that turned my blood to ice. She doesn't just erase people. She rewrites them. I never made it to the cabin. That was never the point. I drove 2 hours out of town, past the county line, and checked into a little roadside motel with nothing but a bed, a weak lamp, and a coffee maker that hadn't worked since the Obama administration. But I didn't need comfort. I needed quiet. I needed to think like her. I laid everything out on the bed. The receipt, the photos, the deed, the burned photo from Lyle's mother, and the handwritten note from the envelope flap. "You're not the only one." I stared at it for a long time. That note had started all of this. Had cracked the lie open. But now I saw it for what it really was. Not a warning. A lifeline. There were others like me. Some broken. Some vanished. But not all of them had stayed gone. One had surfaced. One had posted the comment about apartment C. And I was ready to meet him. I opened my laptop and logged into a secure video call, using credentials sent to me anonymously the day before. A man appeared. He looked older than I expected. Hair graying at the temples. A scar just above his left eyebrow. It was Martin. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he nodded once and said, "You figured it out." Over the next hour, he told me everything. How he met Delaney back when she went by another name. How she targeted him during a vulnerable time in his life. Divorce, failed business, isolation. How she mirrored everything he wanted to hear, every dream he had, until he trusted her with everything. Then, slowly, she flipped the script. Undermined him professionally. Gaslit him emotionally. And when he finally confronted her, she accused him of harassment. Legal teams got involved. He nearly lost everything. "But I didn't," he said, leaning forward. "Because I was smart enough to document everything. And quiet enough to let her think she'd won." That's when I saw it. The same patience I'd been practicing for weeks. Martin didn't get revenge. He built a safety net. Not for himself, but for the next person. He'd been following her quietly ever since. Watching. Waiting. Gathering proof. He'd even been the one to contact Lyle's mother, years later, and share what he knew. It was Martin who had taken the surveillance photos. Who mailed the envelope. Who made sure I had time to wake up before she erased me like the others. "She's careless when she's winning," he said. "That's when you take the shot." And that's exactly what I did. When I returned home, I said nothing. I let her think I'd gone off to sulk in the woods and come back empty, just as she expected. I told her I was ready to talk about us. She lit up, not with love, but victory. She believed it. Believed she'd won again. But I had already forwarded everything to an attorney, a good one, from out of state. We filed first, preemptively, quietly, and then we froze the joint accounts. The house. Turns out she'd forged one of the signature documents on the refinance last year. Martin helped me find it. That alone would bury any countersuit. When I finally served her papers, she stared at me for a full 10 seconds in stunned silence. Then she smiled, not in amusement, but in realization. "You're not as soft as I thought," she whispered. "No," I said. "I'm not." That was the last real conversation we had. It's been 11 months since she moved out. I kept the house. I adopted a second dog. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I needed to know why I let it go on so long. Why I thought love had to be earned through suffering. It hasn't been easy. Healing never is. But last week, I got a message from Lyle's mother. She had finally been able to close the missing person case. A body had never been found, but new information, my information, led to proof that Delaney had stolen his identity to open credit cards in his name after he disappeared. That gave the police enough to reopen their side of things. She's not on the run. Not yet. But her web is collapsing. And for the first time in years, I can breathe. I don't hate her. I don't need revenge. What I needed, and what I finally have, is the truth. Because once you know who someone truly is, you never have to fear them again. The best thing I ever did wasn't exposing her. It was choosing not to become like her. And now? Now I get to rewrite my story. This time, for real.